Good evening and welcome to the latest edition of Gajtka Game on the River's Edge, Pens Overtime Edition. I'm Matt Gajtka, deep in the heart of Millvale in the aftermath of the Penguins' 7-2 win over the Rangers at PPG Paints Arena. It was a close game for quite some time, but it ended up not being the case in the end. The Penguins pouring it on and in the process taking down New York and taking over first place in the Metropolitan Division, 47 points apiece, but the Penguins, with 2 games in hand on the Rangers, will go into their final 2 games before the holiday break with a, points percentage lead over the Rangers, if not a literal points lead. Thanks again for watching on Facebook Live, as well as our live page on the website, riversedgepgh.com/live. This is the second edition of Pens Overtime, and I'm your host, Matt Gajtka, and we have quite a bit to bring your way over the course of the next half an hour. Of course, as I did last week for the overtime win against the Bruins, I'll go over some key points of the game, some immediate takeaways in the aftermath of the victory this evening. And also in the second segment, I'll welcome in a guest. Last week it was Pens historian Bob Grove. This week it is Pens analyst for HockeyBuzz.com and also a podcaster. The Hockey Hurts podcast is his baby. His name is Ryan Wilson. He goes by Gunnar Stahl on Twitter. You might know him from there. And he has an analytical mind when it comes to the sport of hockey, so I enjoy reading all of his observations, whether it be on Twitter or at Hockey Buzz, or as I mentioned, on his own podcast. So I'll be glad to welcome him in this week. Later on in the program, we'll look ahead to the coming week for the Penguins. The Christmas break is on the way. The Pens will have 3 days off, which will feel like 7 in this season of condensed scheduling. However, they do have that full week off coming up at the start of the new year. So all of a sudden, things are slowing down a little bit in terms of game frequency. Although this week they still have 3, a couple more coming up before they take a few days to themselves and then get right back at it before they can get after that final week of the calendar year 2016. Penguins playing extremely well in the month of December, all things considered. Their win this evening at PPG Paints was their 8th of the month in 10 games, and the only 2 times they've lost, both occurred this past weekend against the Kings and the Maple Leafs, and those were in overtime. So the Pens have points in each of their 10 games this month, and they have, as a result, as I mentioned right at the top of this program, vaulted to the top of the Metro standings, and they're 1 shy of the Blackhawks for the top spot in all of the National Hockey League, and they have a game in hand on Chicago. So another win on Thursday could put them in the top spot once again, which they have been flirting with and reaching occasionally here in the latter half of the month of December. But let's go to my immediate takeaways for tonight's win. As I mentioned, 7-2. And the story before the game for the Pens was the Penguins' debut of Chad Ruhwedel, called up from Wilkes-Barre Scranton. He took the place of Trevor Daley and or Chris Letang, I guess you could say either one, as both Daley and Letang are out multiple weeks with injuries, undisclosed, of course, this being hockey. And so Ruhwedel and Derek Pouliot, the former first-round pick in 2012, got the call in the third pairing. That was something to watch. And also a shuffle up front. The HBK line put back together Hagelin, Bonino, and Kessel. Patrick Hornqvist moved down from the first line to the second alongside Yevgeny Malkin. And also Chris Kunitz bumped up to that Malkin line into the top 6 once again. So Kunitz, who would come through later on in this game, not to spoil anything if you didn't watch it, but Kunitz and Hornqvist flanking Malkin, Sheary, and Rust. Brian Rust getting a shot with Sidney Crosby on the top unit. So on to the first period, and that is where the Penguins started off with a 4-minute power play, a disjointed effort that was rescued by Sidney Crosby's high deflection on Eric Cole's hard pass. That's the type of play we've seen, say, the Detroit Red Wings pull off many, many times At least in past years, maybe not so recently. Pavel Datsyuk and Henrik Zetterberg used to work that play to perfection, and it's so impossible to stop if the pass is good, which it was from Cole, and if the deflection is on point, which it was from Crosby. A long-range tip, if you will, from Sid, who gets number 22 on the season, Sidney Crosby, reinventing himself, so to speak, yet again, although we've already seen this version as the top finisher in the NHL. This takes us back to 2009 to 2010 to 2011, just before he was knocked out, literally, of action for almost a year due to that concussion at the Winter Classic. So Sid is back in that groove. His 3-game scoring drought is over. Pens had a 1-0 lead, and it looked like it would hold up because Matt Murray appeared sharp early on. He stoned Jimmy Vesey on a tricky little redirect in front of broken play, in fact, by the Rangers. Ended up being a bang-bang chance. Vesey shot it up high, but Murray, doing what he usually does when he has to react quickly, getting out on top of his blue paint as fast as possible and making himself big, using all that 6'4" frame and putting it to good use. He stoned Vesey there, but then Murray allowed a long-range goal from Pumple on the left wing side, which took some of the air out of things for the Penguins, at least momentarily. It was an awkward-looking goal. Matt Pumple, by the way, is his name, his second of the season, and that came with about 3 minutes left in the first period. Murray not using his glove well, and we've seen that over the course of his young NHL career. The legs work well, the body, as I mentioned, usually in the right position, but the glove hand side can sometimes be leaky, and that one went in on Matt Murray. But the Pens had the only 2 goals of the second period, an entertaining second period as the teams went up and down. Change was half executed. Phil Kessel was on the ice with Yevgeny Malkin and Chris Kunitz, and Kessel started a play that ended up being a give and go with Kunitz and Malkin from the left boards to the slot. Malkin a one-timer, brilliant finish. Gino makes it 2-1 Pens. And not long after Michael Grabner hit the post on a breakaway, the Penguins scored again. Phil Kessel nudging one through Antti Raanta, the Rangers goalie tonight. No Lundqvist. It was Raanta this evening for the second time in 3 meetings between these two teams this season. Murray made a save on Stepan. I should mention as well, just before Phil Kessel drove that one through Raanta from the slot and just over the goal line. Malkin with a sharp pass to set that up in front. Kessel had enough time to dust off the puck and fire it through Raanta. So 3-1 Pens, despite plenty of chances late in that second period. Crosby could have gotten a second rather easily after he took a kneeing penalty that neutralized a power play. He was freed from the penalty box, sent in, not alone, but streaking down that right side, a view we've seen so often from Crosby this season and last year after Mike Sullivan took over. The Pens are finding him with speed on that breakout. Crosby nearly putting one past the blocker hand of Raanta, but Raanta got the shaft of his stick on it. Bit of a lucky save, but also a quick reaction from the Rangers goalie. So that one would have brought the house down, but it ended up being a 3-1 score going into the second period. Antti Raanta also made perhaps his best save of the game on Brian Rust before the second expired. Crosby on the setup, and those two would connect in the third period a little bit later on. Michael Grabner might have been the Rangers' most effective offensive player early in the third period. He struck early on, 152 in from Stepan and Zuccarello. It was 3-2. Things were looking tense, and typical Rangers outshot, outchanced. At least this year that's been typical Rangers, but they are able to cash in on their opportunities, and that has started to dry up on them. They haven't shot at such a high percentage in the last month or so. They were leading the league in goals for quite some time before the Penguins, and at least one other team has passed them up in goals per game recently. But a little flash of that from Grabner, who is so quick, so tough to corral. His 14th of the year, a guy not known for his hands, but he gets plenty of looks, and occasionally he gets hot finishing them, and he's in another stretch like that. So it was 3-2, as I mentioned, but then Justin Schultz continued his strong play, skated the puck in below the goal line, in fact, and centered for Phil Kessel. It rattled in off a Ranger with, it was Hornqvist in front, and he was causing the havoc. It rattled in, though, off a New York defender in front, and Schultz had his 6th of the season. Justin Schultz showing so much confidence, getting in deep in the zone, as I mentioned. He's just as much at home below the goal line as he is on the blue line in the offensive zone, it seems. So that was 4-2, and then Crosby on the rush, It almost looked like a shot that was deflected going wide of the net that Brian Rust nudged in, steered in from the side of the goal for his 9th of the season at 6:12. But in reality, looking at the replay, I'm convinced Crosby was making a firm pass to his new line mate Rust. And Rust is a straight line player, somewhat reminiscent of Chris Kunitz and Pascal Dupuis back in the day when they were on Crosby's wings. Maybe this could work. This change from Sullivan certainly paid off, though, tonight. Rust from Crosby for a 5-2 game. Hornqvist from Bonino. The Rangers not defending very well on a power play. The Pens get their 3rd power play goal in the latter half of the 3rd period. And then Bonino himself from Rust with 11 seconds to play in the 3rd. That was the conversion, if you will, and a 7-2 win for the Pens wrapped up there. By the numbers, I mentioned the teams came into the evening trending in opposite directions in shot generation. The Pens have come back to earth a little bit since a really strong stretch in late November and early December. That Toronto game was a pretty good example of that. They were chasing the play for much of the night. Tonight, not the case, though. The Rangers, who have been playing better in that regard and in generating shots and chances, they were smacked down 52-31 in 5-on-5 shot attempts per Corsica Hockey. You can find those wonderful numbers at Corsica.hockey. Beautiful website there, so I want to give them a plug. 70-45 were the shot attempts overall, counting 4-on-4, also power play situations. So any way you want to slice it up, the Penguins had the lion's share of the play, the lion's share of the scoring chances as well. And I mentioned just the raw shot attempts were rather dominant. And shots on goal, if you're into that sort of thing, 47-27 for the Pens. That is the most the Pens have ever had against the Rangers, thanks to Pens historian Bob Grove for that little nugget. On home ice, that is. 47 shots on goal. Antti Ranta under siege. And Matt Murray, all things considered, had a pretty easy evening. Let 2 in on 27 shots. And the one ugly one in the first period. But I mentioned also he made some key ones. He has been reliable in those high-danger situations for the most part. It's just been the perhaps medium to low-danger chances that have sometimes gotten behind him. So an interesting year for Matt Murray, but his save percentage numbers say it all this season. He has been getting the results as he has since he joined the Penguins last year. So that was that. 6 Pens with multiple points. Evgeny Malkin had 3, a goal and 2 helpers. Kessel 1-1, Crosby 1-1, Bonino 1-1, Rust 1-1, Chris Kunitz with 2 assists, and let's not forget Patrick Hornqvist with a goal. So the Pens spread it around. Justin Schultz had 2 points as well. So did Ian Cole. So from the blue line, too, the offense was pouring in fast and furious. Not too much you can complain about in the end if you're a Penguins fan tonight, as they get the win. They snap a 2-game winless streak, you could call it, and improve their record to 21-7-5. Listen to this record on home ice: 14-2-2 at PPG Paints Arena. Same old arena, new name, whatever it is. It's agreeing with the Pens so far. We'll step aside for a break, short break here on Pens Overtime on the River's Edge. Thanks for watching and listening. I'm Matt Gajtka. When I return, Pens analyst and podcaster Ryan Wilson will join me here on the broadcast. Keep it right here. Be back in just about a minute.
Would you be interested in developing conscious choice? Would you be interested in creating reactions rather than waiting for one to come? Would you be interested in combining serendipity and synchronicity? Would you be interested in making 1 + 1 = 3? Would you be interested in finding out about full impact mindfulness? If so, I challenge you to join myself, Jim Ellermeyer, a cognitive behavioral health therapist, every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. on the River's Edge, where we will challenge you to allow us to help you help yourself to fully participate in your life. Let the adventure begin.
Second period time here on Pens Overtime. I'm Matt Gajtka, and this is the River's Edge. You can find us at riversedgepgh.com. Recapping and rehashing the Penguins' 7-2 victory over the Rangers tonight at PPG Paints Arena. The pre-holiday run-up, this pre-Christmas week, contains 3 games, and the Pens have their first victory in that stretch. They'll go on the road to face Columbus on Thursday, and then Saturday they will host the New Jersey Devils at PPG Paint. So a couple more games coming up before they take 3 off, as I mentioned, and then leading right into that bye week in the first week of 2017. My guest at this time on Pens Overtime writes regularly on the Pens with an analytical frame of mind on HockeyBuzz.com. He also has a podcast called Hockey Hurts, of which he is the co-host. His name is Ryan Wilson, and he joins me right now on the River's Edge. Ryan, good evening, sir.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So the Penguins, as I mentioned before the break, fairly dominant in all stretches of the imagination. A 5-goal win, that says a lot. But beyond that, the attempts, the chances, they were all mostly in favor of the Penguins. And both teams with injuries, Ryan, so it's not like the one team had a huge edge in terms of that sort of thing. So what did you make of how this one turned out tonight?
It was a really good start to what I think could be a really tough 5-game stretch without Chris Letang, given how well literally every team in the Metropolitan Division is playing right now. New York's been really good. Columbus, what did they win their 10th in a row tonight?
Yes.
I think it was really nice to get a 5-goal win against the New York Rangers and kick this thing off.
So looking at this evening, the big storylines, at least for me, was the shuffling of the forward lines. HBK back together. Patrick Hornqvist knocked down to Malkin's wing, and that's where Chris Kunitz was today, too. And then Brian Rust up with Sidney Crosby. So I guess we could go a whole bunch of different ways with this one. But do you see this arrangement, this top 9 for Mike Sullivan, having some staying power? And if so, why so?
Well, the nice thing about the Penguins forwards when they're all healthy, pardon me, is Mike Sullivan has options. I kind of like the look tonight. Brian Rust, I think, has got a little bit more foot speed than Patrick Hornqvist. I think he's a little better with the controlled zone entries as a result. And I think he makes slightly more controlled plays than Hornqvist. So maybe he's not a bad fit for Sid right now. He, on his goal, showed he can go right to that crease front area that we've seen Crosby hit Hornqvist with so many times. And Kunitz, Malkin, Hornqvist, that's a good trio too. And even though HBK's kind of had a rough go of it earlier in the year, we'll see if that can turn around.
What do you make of Chris Kunitz's game at this stage of his career? The goals have dried up, the points have dried up for the most part, but clearly the Penguins coaches still see him as a useful player. I've been tracking zone exits and entries, and by at least one measure, by combined controlled exits and entries, he's the 5th best Penguin in rate stats as far as per 60 minutes at 5-on-5. So he's doing the little things, so to speak, that can add up to be big things, I think, whether it be by the eye test or objectively speaking. But do you think he is still a top 9 or top 6 player even at this stage of his career?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think he gets the credit that he deserves. I know that it's noticeable at times when he kind of makes flubs a few plays here and there that he used to not do.
Yeah.
But the reason he's doing all the things that you spoke to is because he's trying to make controlled plays. When you have the puck on your stick trying to do those kind of things, you're going to be more prone to making errors. Something that people may not know, Kunitz has more even-strength goals the last 2 years than Patrick Hornqvist. So if we're going to throw some darts at Chris Kunitz, we got to be fair in our criticisms.
Absolutely. And Patrick Hornqvist is an interesting character, isn't he? Because I know objectively it's sometimes tough to sum up his value in a lot of ways. And you just mentioned one of those, even strength, not a strength. But he's back on the power play. And as we saw tonight on the Schultz goal, which rattled around and in front, he attracts attention. He creates havoc. So I think in a lot of ways he gives the Penguins something that they don't get from other players. But at the same time, do you feel like he might be a little overrated in terms of what he brings to the table?
I think at times he can be overrated. I don't want to call him overrated because his possession metrics are very good. Mm-hmm. Depending on how much stock you put into the individual expected goals, he fares really well in that above Crosby and Malkin. So I'm kind of still trying to wrap my head around that metric. It's not passing the smell test for me right now, having him so much higher than two guys that are within 3 points and 4 points is Connor McDavid for the league lead in scoring. But overrated, such a strong word, but there are things about him that I have personal biases with. He doesn't make many controlled plays. I tend to value that kind of stuff. I feel as though those are the kind of players that keep plays alive longer. And when you're playing with Sid and Gino, if you can extend plays, we know what can happen when you do that.
Talking to Ryan Wilson, a.k.a. Gunnar Stahl, on Twitter. He is a Pens analyst and podcaster, HockeyBuzz.com and the Hockey Hurts podcast. I'm Matt Gajtka, and this is Pens Overtime. Ryan, we have a question from Lance Johnson on Twitter, so let's fire away with that. He is asking about Chad Ruhwedel making his Penguins debut. Could you make heads or tails of his performance tonight?
It's quite a limited sample. I did get to see him play a little bit. Being in Western New York, he played for Buffalo. Right. Even that sample is going to be a tough one because the Sabres were really trying to lose every single game that year, and they did a really good job at it because they got Jack Eichel. You know, he is what he is. He's going to be the emergency call-up, and he got some time. I don't really have, I'm sorry to Lance, I don't have much of an opinion past that because I just don't see him as part of a regular piece of what is a Stanley Cup contender.
I will give Chad credit. He was confident enough to creep in the back door. Kessel set him up for a glorious chance in the first period. Ronta made the save, one of a couple really nice ones from the Rangers goalie. So at least in that regard, he fits in with the Penguins' swarming style. More pointedly, though, Ruhwedel's partner, Derek Pouliot, he had a really strong game in Toronto, I thought, by the metrics and by the eye until the overtime. And, of course, he got some help or hindrance, more accurately, from the referee on the turnover that led to Toronto's game-winning goal. But he has, over the course of his intermittent time in Pittsburgh, shown flashes. What do you think might be holding him back? Is there anything holding him back outside of simply increased playing time?
Sample size.
Yeah.
They don't let him play through mistakes at all. Like, all right, if you're a player and you really want to play and you know that you have a limited sample, you're going to think when you're on the ice and you're going to know every mistake's going to be magnified. And that kind of sums up his career with Pittsburgh. Has he ever really played longer than 20 games in a row?
Oh, I seriously doubt it. I don't have the numbers offhand.
That's not an easy existence, and I know it sounds like I'm creating excuses, but, you know, we've seen some defensemen in the last few years that have gotten longer rope than the 8th overall pick.
Yeah.
Ali Mata's had really terrible stretches. And, you know, they did fit him the one game, but past his first year with Matt Niskanen playing sheltered minutes, so basically he got sheltered minutes with a top 4 NHL defenseman and did really great, and that's good. And we're seeing Coleman Schultz do that in that role.
Absolutely.
But, you know, I don't think Pouliot's been great at all, but I do think that they kind of mushed him with the development. Every time they let him play, one mistake, he's benched or sent down. That's not an easy environment to develop as a player, in my opinion.
Well, the reason he's getting a look right now is Chris Letang is out with a lower body injury. Also, Trevor Daley, that necessitated the call-up of Ruhwedel and his playing time tonight. But with Letang, you wrote something in a recent piece on Hockey Buzz that I liked. You said the Penguins are a team of transition, especially when generating offense, they rely on transition. And Chris Letang is the king of transition in a lot of different ways. I don't know if you said it in so many words, but that was the gist of it. So is he the Penguins' most irreplaceable player? I tend to think he is these days just because of the redundancy, if you want to call it that, between Crosby and Malkin, 1A, 1B centers.
Yeah, you nailed it on the head. Penguins got two guys sniffing the scoring lead. They lose one, they still got a really great player behind it. And yes, if Crosby were to miss extended time, of course that would hurt the team. But Malkin's there. Kessel's there. They have some high-end players. I don't think you can argue there's anything close to a high-end player behind Chris Letang, especially on the right side.
quick peek ahead to Thursday. I keep getting my schedule confused. The Penguins are in Columbus on Thursday, first meeting with the very surprising Jackets, who, if you want to go by points percentage, lead the very strong Metro division. So Pens at Jackets, then it's a probably not a home and home, but a back-to-back situation. Devils on Friday, then 3 days off, and they're in Newark on the backside of the Christmas break. But a quick peek ahead to that Jackets game. I know you spoke about it on your recent podcast, Hockey Hurts, by the way. I want to give that a plug. But what do you see in the Jackets? The numbers underlying and both on the surface make them look really legit, and I have to say, I didn't see this one coming at all this season.
Oh, I whiffed on that preseason prediction. I had them at the bottom of the division, and I don't think I was alone in that, but boy,
no.
You can feel the breeze on that swing and miss. I think Bob is playing great. That's a huge thing. So sometimes we see goaltenders that can carry a mediocre team. We saw that a few years ago when Carey Price was out of this world. Except, I don't think the Blue Jackets are playing mediocre hockey. Their underlying possession numbers are really good. So I don't think this is a fluke by any stretch of the imagination, at least from what I'm looking at. And I think a big thing is they finally have three defensemen that can really move the puck. Zach Werenski's been awesome. He deserves to be in the Calder discussion. Seth Jones being there. And then Ryan Murray's finally strung together some games in a row without being hurt.
Zach Werenski. I didn't anticipate him being that big of a difference maker. Maybe I should have, but he was enjoyable to watch. I got a chance to see him play for the University of Michigan up at Penn State, and boy, did he control the play. He was definitely playing that type of midfielder role, it seemed like, if you want to use a soccer reference. So I suppose if you want to pick out one real addition to their roster as a regular, Werenski would be that for the Jackets. So I look forward to that matchup. The Jackets and the Penguins typically play different styles. Jackets more of a heavy hockey, if you will, and the Penguins like to get up and down the ice. Ryan, thank you very much for your perspective. We'll look for more from you at hockeybuzz.com, and have a great evening.
Thank you, Matt, and congratulations on the new addition to the family.
I appreciate that, yeah. I don't know if little Lucas is at home listening right now, but that's why we have podcasts, so thanks, man.
Yeah,
I'll talk to you
my
later.
third one just started crawling, so be ready for that. They're sneaky. Yeah, they're sneaky when they get crawling, so heads up.
Yeah, he's pretty easy right now. He sleeps and he eats, and that's about all there is. He doesn't have to be corralled in any way, so I guess I have that looking ahead. I
got to make sure the older ones' Legos are put away.
Oh, boy. Hey, Legos, that's right in my wheelhouse when I was a kid, too, so I'm pretty sure we're going to have those around the house, too. That's Ryan Wilson. I'm Matt Gajtka. We'll take a short break, and when I come back, we'll wrap up Penn's overtime on the River's Edge. Again, Penn 7, New York 2. The Penguins' explosive December continues on tonight at home. Be right back after this short break.
Hey, folks, it's Mike Sasson. Just so you guys understand, if there's one thing I do better than anybody I know, it's talk about nothing for an hour. Want proof? Here's the proof. The Mike Sasson Show. It's going to be on from 10 a.m. to 11 every Tuesday starting July 19th. It's an hour that you'll never get back. Neither will I, so we'll have that in common. Here on the River's Edge.
Back to the third period. And again, thank you to Ryan Wilson for joining the show. Second edition, weekly, is our format here on Penn's Overtime, even though it is technically a post-game show. Not going to go every game unless, of course, demand picks up and maybe this thing takes off, but really enjoying the opportunity to chat with you at least once a week in the aftermath of Penguins games. And tonight, 7-2, Pittsburgh. It was not close in the end. It was close for a bit early in the third period and throughout the opening two, as I gave you an idea of in my rundown early on in today's episode. And again, some shuffling for Mike Sullivan, and it seemed like most of it panned out. Chad Ruedel plugging into that bottom pairing for the Pens alongside Derek Pouliot. But again, Justin Schultz stealing the show on the blue line, running the show on the power play too. And the Pens continue to go with that 4-forward, 1 defenseman setup. When I had Bob Grove on last week after the Penguins win against Boston, we were discussing the more traditional 3-forward, 2 defenseman format on the PP. But just as soon as we talked about that Friday night, last Friday, against L.A., the Pens switched back. They put Hornqvist in the middle again, and, well, part of that, I think, was dictated by the injury to Letang, which occurred in that game against Boston last Wednesday. So the Pens wanted to go with Schultz as the lone blue liner, and a very offensively minded one at that. And I see really good puck distribution skills from him. That's no surprise. He's had that since he was a collegian at the University of Wisconsin. But since he's been in the NHL, it's run hot and cold. Right now, it's running hot. And as I discussed with Bob last week, you'd be surprised if the Pens don't find a way to get him under contract somehow, unless, of course, the pending free agent Schultz decides he wants to test the market. But things are going great for him here in Pittsburgh, I would have to say. The Columbus Blue Jackets are coming up for the Pens, as Ryan talked about, as he alluded to when we started the second period just a moment ago. The Jackets down the Kings 3-2 at Nationwide. That's where the Pens will be taking on Columbus in 2 days. It was a 3-2 in the shootout, 3-2 decision in the shootout for the Jackets, and their record now, after their 10th consecutive victory, that's a franchise high, is 21-5-4, and they played just 30 games. They have some catching up to do in terms of this condensed season, and the Rangers, on the other hand, and the Penguins, to a smaller degree, are on the other side of that spectrum. And the Penguins have 5 games to go before the break. The Rangers have 1 fewer, and the Jackets, after we hit the new year, their schedule will pick up. Columbus, as my DK Pittsburgh Sports colleague Josh Yohe reminded me earlier this week, has played a lot of Western Conference teams. So we'll see how they do against the East, and in particular, this very strong Metro, which has 5 teams at 40 points or more. New York at 47, Pittsburgh at 47, Columbus at 46, Philadelphia at 42, Washington at 41. And in fact, I can throw that up on the screen for you right now. There's your Metro Division standings. And Carolina, New Jersey, and the Islanders in last place. New York, boy, have they fallen in the last couple of seasons. But for right now, they are holding up the rear end of this 8-team conference or division. And the Penguins right at the top. And you see the strength there as you scroll on down the standings. You see Montreal with 44, but any of the top 5 teams in the Metro Division would be right there for first place or in first place in the Atlantic. And we head on down to the Central Division out west, just 2 teams with 40 points or more. And look at this in the Pacific, none with 40 at all. San Jose, Anaheim, Edmonton, all tied for first with 39 points. Edmonton might be the story of the season in that division, but it might also be the struggles of the Kings, the Ducks, relatively speaking. I guess the Sharks, you can't say they're struggling at 19-12-1, but they, coming off a conference championship in the playoffs, are unable to pull away from both the Ducks and the Oilers and the Flames and the Kings, for that matter. And then you see at the bottom the weak sisters of the Pacific Division, those squads obviously rebuilding Vancouver and Arizona. That helps bring down the level of the division, but you'd think those teams at the top would be taking advantage of that, but they haven't so far, at least through about a third of the NHL season. So that's your standings overview. Might seem a little early for some of you to look at the standings, but I always like to take a peek, especially after American Thanksgiving. And yes, hockey is the only sport in which you have to put that modifier in front of Thanksgiving. American Thanksgiving, not Canadian Thanksgiving, which falls on our Columbus Day. But after American Thanksgiving, teams typically settle in. They are what they are in terms of positioning. And we've seen that over the course of the NHL going back to the full season lockout and even before. Teams don't move that much after the end of November. So what you see right now is probably what we're going to get at the start of April when we begin to look at playoff seedings and playoff matchups. Top 3 in each division make it. So the Penguins and the Jackets and the Rangers, all of whom have been really hot this month, they're in the top 3 in the Metro, but they're not guaranteed of getting one of those automatic spots. They could be a wild card. Now they're pretty safe in making a wild card spot if the season ended today. There's a cliche for you that I might kill on Gajtka Game coming up later this week. But that tells you the overall strength of the division, and that's why tonight's result, frankly, 7-2, Pens over the Rangers, was so surprising. Not just in goal scoring, but also in shots, in tilting the ice, time of possession in the offensive zone, whatever you want to look at. The Penguins were all over New York this evening, and that gives the Pens a 2-1 edge in the season series against a team that figures to be there until the end. And that is the final visit for the Rangers into PPG Paints Arena, at least in the regular season this year. Thank you for watching and listening to Pens Overtime on the River's Edge. It's been a blast, as it was last week, and we'll look forward to another episode next week. If I had to put it into so many words, I think we'll do games earlier in the week. We'll lean towards that since my show, Gajtka Game, runs on Friday. So we'll spread out the Matt Gajtka experience here on the River's Edge, or at least try to. So look for Monday or Tuesday games in the future to contain some Pens overtime action after the final buzzer sounds. Tonight, again, it was 7-2 Pens. Thanks to Ryan Wilson for joining me on the broadcast. We'll have to get with him again for more of that insight. Again, he's a Pens analyst and podcaster. HockeyBuzz.com is where you can find him. Gunnar Stahl on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter at Matt Gajtka. I'm also a reporter and analyst for DKPittsburghSports.com. And as I mentioned, 2 shows a week now here on the River's Edge. Until later, this is Matt reminding you that when the radio fades, you know life's moving fast. Talk to you on Friday for another episode of Gike's Got Game.